Welcome to the Radio Academy's R.O.A.R webinar. This is the first of its kind. The race, this race on audio and radio discussion has been going on for a long time, and it's been a long time coming. It's time that we all got comfortable with having the uncomfortable discussion around race and equality and diversity within the radio industry. It's a compelling issue that we have to talk about, and for reasons within the industry and across the UK and all industries really, it's been something that we've been trying to deal with for over 50 years. And despite the over 50 years of national race discrimination policies and policies about equality and diversity, not a lot has changed, and even less so within the radio industry. And according to Ofcom's latest report, representation of people from minority ethnic groups still remains at 7%, far below the UK working average, which is 12%. So we have to ask ourselves the question, is this poor representation because Black people just don't want to be in the radio industry, or is there an inherent bias within the system preventing employment and social mobility within our industry for Black people? Remember, the figures for Black representation in our industry is probably worse at the top. You just don't see us being represented in the higher echelons. So it's time the radio industry became color brave and not color blind. It's time to change the paradigm. Through the two discussions that we'll have over this week and next week, we'll be looking at the radio industry from in front of the mic and behind the mic. This week's scene is really, this week's webinar is really about in front of the mic. We hope to contribute to the starting of open and transparent discussions that will begin to change the process, changing the radio playing fields into a level playing field and become more, which will also help us to become more representative of our listeners. And in the process, we hope this will also make the Black talent in the British radio industry feel better and not bitter. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Yvonne Thompson, and I'm chair of the Radio Academy, and I have been for the past 3 years now. My maiden speech was entitled, "The British Radio Industry Needs to Diversify or Die." It was not the most welcome or appreciated speech that I've ever given. The race and audio radio discussion has been a long time coming, and that time is now. We have a fantastic panel from across the UK to speak their truths about their experiences, both good and bad, their challenges and how they dealt with those challenges. We will not be naming, shaming, or blaming anybody. We just want to spread or share our experiences so that we can all learn from each other, and hopefully we'll get some solutions towards moving towards a better and a more diverse radio industry. At the end of the two sessions, we will have both recommendations from panelists and from great ideas that I expect will be logged into the chat box. And we will be putting them into a document of recommendations where those who care can request a copy, because I'm sure it's going to be very interesting. Once the panelists have introduced themselves, we hope to have a more general discussion, and then we'll have a Q&A. I know some of our panelists have to leave, but if there's an appetite for it and any of the others that can stay and the audience would like to carry on talking, we can extend the session up to about 30 minutes. I do ask that the audience respect the panelists' time, experience, and generosity, and keep the chat on point and gracious. So with that, I'm honored to welcome our panelists. We have with us tonight Toni McDonald from BBC Radio Hereford and Worcester. If you can give us a wave when I mention your name. Nels Hylton from Transmission Roundhouse. Aminata Kamara from BBC Radio Leicester. Darren Bent from talkSPORT Radio. And of course, the one who needs no introduction, Mr. Trevor Nelson. They'll each give us about 3 to 4 minutes on who they are, which station they're at, what their position is, and what their best and worst experience has been that they've had since they've been on radio. And then before we move on to the general Q&A, I'll ask some opening questions and then I'll open it to the audience in the chat box. So in closing, I'll ask each of them to suggest at least one thing that they can give us that will be a solution towards moving towards change. So with that, let's hear from our very first speaker. Nels, I'm going to hand over to you to start the discussion, and you've got 3 minutes. I know you can all keep to time because you're all fantastic presenters. I know that. So off you go, Nels. Thanks very much.
Awesome, thank you. Hi everyone, my name's Nels. I'm 24 years old. I'm a presenter for Transmission Roundhouse, which is a youth community station based in London. And I've been doing that for about 10 years. I'd say the main thing that I want to achieve in radio is showing that different people can promote and talk about different types of music. That's been one of my main goals. Growing up as a young black man that talks about predominantly rock music, it hasn't always been easy. Like, I get a lot of, you shouldn't listen to rock, that's not really your thing, that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's kind of been, I'd say, like a bit of a journey going through, growing up with that sort of stigma around rock music and the color of your skin in rock music. Best experience, I'd say recently, I won a competition called BBC New Voices in Kent. So I was supposed to start my on radio show on BBC Radio Kent, but obviously COVID permitting, we're waiting for that to go ahead. Worst experiences, again, I'm kind of like very early on in my career, so I wouldn't say there's been a lot of bad experiences yet. However, I do feel, irregardless of, bad experiences, I kind of have to dilute myself before going into the workplace, whatever that may be, just in case, I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and that's okay. But like growing up as a young black man and moving into the workplace with like a lack of role models that represent me, I feel like I've had to dilute myself going forward. But that's all good because eventually it will work out.
Fantastic, well said. Now there's a good example. That was 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Okay, so let's move on. Thank you very much, Nels. So you've had a fairly straightforward ride so far, and I noticed you said so far. So let's hope that that doesn't change. Let's move on to Aminata.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Please excuse, I'm currently in the newsroom and there's a bit of a light flickering issue, so please excuse that. I've been with the BBC now. I present on BBC Radio Leicester, and I've been here for a little over a year, just over a year actually. I actually joined the BBC in a very unique process, quite similar to you, Nels, but I went through the New Voices. Was it New Voices? It was called something different. It was a new presenter search. So they were looking for a black presenter to present on a Wednesday evening, a show targeted at a young black audience. So that's exactly what I do. And I will be on air in about an hour's time. So my journey has been an interesting one. I don't have a background or history in radio. I actually have a drama background. And I abandoned that many years ago. But I've always been very keen on stories. The work that I used to do on stage was very much about telling people's real stories and giving the audience an opportunity to enter into a world or people, individuals that they would never encounter otherwise. So that's very similar to the work that I do on air as well. I'd probably say my best moment, it was towards the beginning of when I started my show. It was a debate around, I'm sure some of you may remember the H&M incident where they had, it was a campaign where they had lots of girls and one particular black girl with messy hair. And it was a quite a heated debate that we had on air with a couple of different panelists. And it really made me realize the power of radio and how you can really cultivate powerful conversations. So that to me is one that really sticks out because it was funny, entertaining, it was moving, and it allowed many people to kind of change their perspective on how they saw that specific incident. I'd probably say my worst experience has to be more recently when the whole, when the tragic death of George Floyd happened. That I think that he passed away on the Tuesday, and I went on air. I think it came to light on like a Wednesday morning, and I had to go on there in the evening, and I just didn't know how to do it. And these are real things that we have to see and experience. Even as broadcasters, I'm not separate from the world. I'm not separate from the experiences that happen outside of my radio career. And I felt that personally, and I felt the weight of having to be a voice of encouragement, but I was also feeling the pain as well. And I think that is the hardest part of my role that I probably carry every single week. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Wonderful, thank you. Oh gosh, you are good. 2 minutes 55. Now, Trevor, you've got competition.
I want to put my stopwatch on. No, okay.
Thank you so much. No, you're not yet, Trevor. You're last because
Okay,
I know
no
you're going to
problem.
have so much more to say. I think we're going to go over to Darren now. So, Darren, your 3 minutes starts now.
Hi, I'm Darren Bent, former professional footballer, played for 17 years. And just now recently, probably I'd say about a year, I've been at talkSPORT radio. And for the most part, it's been really, really pleasant. I mean, we've managed to add more diversity, to be fair. I think I've hit talkSPORT at a right time, to be fair, because they are really campaigning really hard to try and change the image of talkSPORT. I mean, I'm not quite sure if anyone listened to talkSPORT maybe a few years ago. Situations that have arose quite recently with the George Floyd stuff and the whole Burnley banner saying white lives matter. They might have avoided that, but to be fair, they've made a real conscious effort now to attack these incidents head on. And being part of that and being obviously one of the faces now, the black faces in the station, it's a real eye-opener for me because it's not just the black people now that they've got on the radio station talking about it. It's like everybody wants to talk about it. So at the minute, it's a real positive environment. So I'd probably have to say that the best experience now was everyone coming together at the radio station. And as I said, it's not just about the black faces, because I'm now seeing a lot of ex-footballers now who are black that are now looking at the station and thinking, well, you know what, that's kind of an environment that I want to work in. Because before I would have probably looked, when I was playing, there was no way I would have probably looked at talkSPORT and thought, I'm going to fit in there, unfortunately. But as it evolved, more and more people are getting involved with talkSPORT. And as I said, they are making a real conscious effort to make it now appealing to absolutely everybody. So I'd have to say from positive experiences, I just like what's going on and how they're going about their business and things like that. I'd say the only negative stuff, which has been quite tough, was when the whole George Floyd situation arose and he was killed. It was probably when we tried to talk about it on air, it was the backlash from people that just don't want to change. That was probably the hardest thing, where people, the comments, the tweets, and I know what you could say, just don't read it. But honestly, that was a real eye-opener again, is in how ignorant some people still are. Like we weren't saying on the station that black lives are more important than anyone else, but that was the message that kept coming in. What about white lives matter? All lives matter. And it was a constant battle, and every single day. I mean, it was upsetting at first, some of the comments, because until it's actually in your face and you don't realize how ignorant people really are. But when you're there trying to explain what you mean by the Black Lives Matter movement and this situation and that, and people just don't want to listen to it, it becomes very, very difficult. So I'd have to say, on the whole, talkSPORT has been absolutely brilliant. But if there was one bad point, that was that. We're trying to obviously explain what we meant by the Black Lives Matter, but people just not getting it.
That's amazing. And again, 2:30, very good. Very good. Well, excellent. Excellent presenter. But can I just ask you one thing, Darren? Has that experience, because you've expressed it the most now, has that experience, does that make you bitter or does it make you better?
Certainly not bitter, because do you know what? The reason why I think it's better is because when we was all kind of fighting the same battle, that's black and white and people of all ethnicities, because we all came together at the station and all made an effort to fight it, we didn't feel like we was alone. And that goes from the very, very top, the bosses at the top of talkSPORT, to everybody. Was all, every show they were trying to make a point of talking about it, trying to fight it, and we all came together, and that was really good to see. So if anything, I felt better for it because I didn't feel like I was on my own.
Right, wonderful, thank you. We'll come back to you for a bit more later. We'll come back to all of you. I want to make sure that we get Toni's point of view in. So over to you, Toni.
No pressure. I'm Toni McDonald. I co-host the breakfast programme Elliot and Toni at Breakfast on BBC Hereford and Worcester, and I do a music show every Saturday as well. My route into radio, I did a media and communication degree. I'd done work experience at school at a radio station. I first actually wanted to be the editor of Smash Hits when I was growing up, if anybody else remembers that magazine. I love my pop music. But then I did work experience at my local station, BRMB, as it was then, and just fell in love with it. And a friend's dad said, you should be on the radio. So that was just it. Once I did work experience, that's what I wanted to do. So I did the degree. At the end of the degree, BRMB was taken over by what was Capital Radio, and they were offering overnight shifts, graveyard shifts at the weekend. So I went down with a friend of mine. She got 2 shifts, I got 1, and it started from there. I was supposed to have a BBC interview the day of my first programme as well, but working at my hometown station was the big thing for me. But I still did the BBC interview for the experience anyway. But then I fell into more doing stuff more behind the scenes, audience research for radio stations, various ones in the group around the country, before decided to take the plunge into full-time presenting about 15 years ago. Possibly one of the worst experiences was the end of my first breakfast show experience. I was presenting on a station in Gloucester, and I ended up losing that job at the end of the 12-month contract. They didn't renew it because I hadn't progressed enough. But, you know, part of this business is who you know and keeping those contacts. And I just asked around if anybody else needed help and got a short-term contract to the BBC. I also did some overnights at Heart FM in Birmingham. So I was doing 2 jobs at one time. And while I was there, applied for the job that I have now and progressed to co-hosting the breakfast show. Probably the best experience is probably telling my parents, yes, I've actually got a BBC job. But yeah, the Black Lives Matter movement and the whole George Floyd thing has really brought home, maybe people who listened to me didn't give a thought to what colour I am until actually talking about how that affected me. And probably may well have been the first time I'd ever broken on air, because it was such a big thing to talk about. And maybe it was refreshing for the listeners to actually think, oh, okay, and hear another point of view. Broadcasting to a rural area, mainly white area, it's quite difficult, but hopefully education has started now for them.
That's amazing. And that's what it's all about. It's about getting people to talk. As I say, it's about getting people to have the uncomfortable discussion of race. We all have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And the more that we can talk about it, the better for everyone. So I don't think it's just one-sided. We have to encourage that conversation. We have to monitor, we have to lead those conversations and make sure that it comes in the way that everybody understands, you know, that everybody gets something out of it, positive. All right, well, he who should no longer wait, I think. It's time for Mr. Trevor Nelson.
Thanks, Yvonne. I shouldn't really be here, to be honest.
I don't know how I got here. I started life as a record collector of vinyl in the 80s. I was obsessed with music. I had no career ambitions. I didn't dream. I don't think black kids really dreamed. So I didn't dream about being on radio, but worked in a record shop, got asked, did illegal parties, dare I say. And somebody who formed a pirate station called Kiss FM was at one of my parties. He used to buy records off me and said, would I like to be on a new station called Kiss FM, a pirate station? And I said, oh yeah, never done radio. I wasn't very good, but I was a good selector, I think. 5 years later, we got a license. We were legal. As you well know, Yvonne, that was a big year for you as well.
I'm not even going to.
And it was the day. It was the best. I think that was the best day. The day I started as a legal broadcaster was the best day in radio for me, just because a light bulb went off in my head. The worst day for me, or the worst experience on radio, is I've taken every single radio station I've been on off air. By making a mistake, every single one of them, right? So at some point or another, that's the worst feeling, as every one of my fellow panelists will tell you. You don't want that situation on your CV. But no, I think I've been very lucky because black music's what I represent.
Okay, and Toni, you're probably in the least diverse area, I think.
Yeah.
What can you share with us?
It's a very interesting experience. Among our workforce at work, we probably still have a handful of ethnic minority people who work there. So there's me as a black broadcaster. We got mixed race on the team as well, black and white, Anglo-Asian, and also mixed ethnicity, South Asian. And at one point, probably 3 of us were on air in some way, shape or form in the lineup. So you look at our lineup and think, hey, that's pretty cool. I mean, there are certain changes and people have moved on to certain things which have taken that out. Because there's me every day, and then another person a couple of times a week, which is a shame, because this other person is a fantastic broadcaster. Race issues didn't come up that much in being able to talk about them, but if it was called for, I would say, well, this is how it affects me. With the recent events surrounding George Floyd, if you're able to talk about that more and hopefully talk to your audience who don't see many people who look like me or some of my other colleagues very often at all, especially in parts of Herefordshire, Worcestershire, and if you're going North Worcestershire, closer to Birmingham, it's a little more diverse. But there aren't many people who would get that experience, and it's been interesting to get the feedback from that. You get it with a lot of things when you bring up issues of race or immigration. You've got the people who would be, we call it the standard Daily Mail response, where they're going to blame immigrants for everything, and they're going to blame this, that and the other, and why don't all lives matter? And I think me being there a long time, and if I say, look, this is how it affects me, someone like me, my family, and that's how we feel, they might get it a bit more. Other than that, yeah, it's opened up conversations at work. You get to know who kind of your allies are, who want to understand more, who want to talk about it more. And some people don't, or they forget. For example, the incident with Dawn Butler the other day. I logged in, so I'm working at home half the week, and somebody said to me, oh, do you know, I think this story is just really funny how this person's trying to spin this around, and I had to stop and say, no, what you don't understand is how it feels to be stopped and asked these questions. For example, it being a mistake in the first place with the number plates still isn't a reason to be stopped. And then bringing in that whole experience, I think they kind of climbed down a bit, going, okay, I kind of see it. So it's opened that up a bit more, and you do feel a weight as well, I think, that you carry with you. I don't know if any of you had that conversation with your parents from when you were yay high, them telling you that you were going to have to work 10 times harder than anybody else to prove yourself, and that you can be in a particular environment, do a particular thing and get on. And I think I still carry that with me, you know, being the only actual black face at the station, and you are representing every day. So you go in and you give 10 times more to prove to people or the listeners, look, this is somebody who looks different to you, may have a different background, but they can talk about the same issues and maybe bring others to the table that you're not getting much experience of.
So can I ask you all, do you feel that you're there by sheer hard work, talent and perseverance, or do you also feel that you've had support from good leadership within the organisation? Someone at the top has recognised your talent, someone has recognised this is not only the right thing to do, but probably the profitable thing to do, because you're bringing in a more diverse audience. Let's go to Nels. Let's go to Nels.
Okay.
Well, if I could, just on the first question, in terms of talking about radio being, you know, diverse, when I was growing up, obviously, like Trevor said, I had the likes of 1Xtra to listen to, and there were black broadcasters sporadically across, you know, major radio networks. I think now those stations do more than like they were able to back in the day. Like they're allowed to, you know, celebrate things like Notting Hill Carnival. They're allowed to go to Jamaica to talk about, you know, the rise of bashment, etc., and dancehall. But I think so. Me growing up and going into this industry, like when I was at university doing student radio, I was the only black person involved in student radio at my university for the whole 3 years I was there. So in a way, like, you know, other people on this panel have said, it is kind of like we've always had to work 10 times harder just to even get a shout or any type of recognition. And, you know, whilst that hasn't happened yet, I'm sure as long as, you know, keep working hard, things will change. I also think that, again, with being a black broadcaster, it's very easy to be pigeonholed into one style or one show or one genre, etc. Like, you know, I'd like to see, what I'd like to see going forward is more black broadcasters doing different types of shows, like doing breakfast radio or doing, you know, indie music or doing dance music. That's what I hope to see from the radio industry going forward. And to answer your question, sorry, I know it's a bit long with the answer, but yeah.
That's okay. That's what you're here for.
Yeah, to answer your question, I think, well, I can only speak from my own like experiences, and in terms of my presenting, I think it is down to, you know, your hard work to get to where you need to get, like to get those paid presenting roles and to rise up to, you know, national stations. I think it's down to all of the people here. It's down to their hard work.
So do you not feel that there's been any kind of support from leadership within any of the industry? Let's go to Darren. Let's go to Darren, because I think he's been talking about how diverse talkSPORT has now become. So there must be some will, some influence, some wanting for the station to be more diverse, and that would have to come from the top, I would imagine. Darren, what do you think? What do you say on that?
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you said there before about having to work harder, I was always taught as a kid from my parents, playing football as a young kid, that I always felt that I had to work harder just to become equal with the rest of them. That was always my mentality from my grandparents, my father always said, for you to succeed, you're going to have to work doubly hard. So that's kind of stuck with me. So then obviously as I went through my career and then got to talkSPORT, I've continued to work really hard. And as I said, you talked about at the very, very top, well, I'd have to give the credit to someone called Lee Clayton. He's now the boss, the main big boss at talkSPORT now. And he's the one who came in and recognized that there was an issue there, something wasn't quite right. And if you now look across the network, you're talking about like myself, like I've had to work, obviously, it started like one show a week potentially. Now I'm on like 4 or 5 times a week across various shows. Like I'm part of the breakfast team, which was quite, excuse the pun, a little bit white van man in some respects, where the banter wasn't really, if that makes sense, wasn't really for kind of everybody, but they've kind of changed it up now, obviously, with even with the gender, like obviously Laura Woods now, she presents the breakfast show. There's now, I'm part of that team there. And throughout the whole station, Lee Clayton came in and said, things have got to change. And now you're seeing there's different shows, it's like 7 till 10, the kickoff show, which is Hugh Wizencroft. He now hosts that show. And now he always dedicates a section to that diversity throughout sport. So as I said, I've been quite blessed that I've got to talkSPORT at a time where someone came in and understood that the whole station needed to change, because a lot of people I know, especially, and Trevor alluded to it earlier, but he listened to it quite a lot. Well, when I was growing up, my father and his brothers and his friends, they didn't listen to talkSPORT because they couldn't really identify themselves with any of the presenters that were on talkSPORT, because it wasn't the same kind of struggles. So as I said, when I've got to talkSPORT now and they've cut to change it, they put different slots in for different people, it's just a better environment to be in. And the change is not going to stop now, because they're really driving it home. They really want it to be an equal playing field. And as I said, at the minute, I feel blessed to be part of that and be part of the change. And I think there's more to come, because every day I'm seeing more and more people, different people coming into building to try and out. And I don't think it's a case of them just being given out token efforts, like, well, just to tick a box. I genuinely believe that they're given opportunity, they're having conversations. And I think that's the start of it. As long as you're getting an equal opportunity to have a go at the station, then that's what we want to see. And to be fair, it's really going really, really well down there.
That's amazing. Well, maybe there's some good practice that you and talkSPORT can share. And so I'll definitely be coming back to you to get some input for the recommendations for sure. So one of the things that I really want to find out, and again, this is probably Trevor, you've been at the BBC for so long now, you've been so high profile for so long. Do you see yourself in any kind of leadership position, or do you have any ambition to rise in the ranks of the BBC? Only because, you know, seeing is believing, and if you can't see it, you can't achieve it.
No, I understand that. Do you know, that's a very, 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 very interesting question. Because especially since lockdown, I've been on the phone half the week to people who work at the B, black and white. I've been in with bosses behind the scenes. I don't do my stuff on social media. I'm not interested in fighting keyboard warriors, right? That's just negative to me, because they're not representative of everybody, you know, in the population. It's a very dangerous route to take. So because I'm a prominent black broadcaster, I get an audience with whoever, to be honest. I finally have a black boss at 1Extra. I have a black superpower boss in Lorna Clark. She's a black woman like yourself, and she's the boss of all music on the BBC. Incredibly proud of her. I have an incredible boss at Radio 2. And I'm not just saying this because they might be tuning in, I don't know, but it's what, you know, I want to do radio. That's my love. That's the only thing I've ever been good at, honestly. You know, when you're in, Darren, you played football, you know, you found it, you know what I mean? You don't know in life what you're good at until you get given that opportunity. And I found that this is something I can do. For me to get a leadership role, I'd have to come off the radio. And for that, I couldn't do that. So I'd rather nurture, talk. Blackout Tuesday, for example, Yvonne, I can tell you now, Blackout Tuesday, I wasn't on air. I didn't have a show. I wasn't scheduled to have a show. I think I probably would have broken down on air. Because Nels said something at the start of this whole thing about walking into a building, diluting himself. I think we all understand what he means by that. Finally, on British radio, we can celebrate our blackness. Do you understand what I mean? It's something, I was so proud of some of my colleagues on One Extra and Radio 1. Clara Ampho said something, Mr. Jam said stuff, Dottie said stuff, Yasmin. It was just incredible broadcasting, and they played a lot of music that was really strong. But I wasn't on that day, and part of me was glad I wasn't on that day, because you all have an impression of me. I don't know if I would have held it together as quite a professional, because 30 years of internal struggle in some way, shape or form. Everything that everybody said here today, I've felt every single thing of it over the years, because trust me, now we're saying it's not good enough now. Imagine what it was like a quarter century ago.
Yeah.
It's a scary, scary scenario. There were a lot of old school people in charge who made you feel like you were lucky. You know, hey, you're lucky to do what you're doing. But you know what I say to everybody here? You're empowered, because every voice I'm hearing is a great radio voice. Every voice, I can see why everybody here is doing radio. You can hear it. You know, confident.
Me. This is my tryout.
Everybody's confident. It sounds great. But this is what I mean. This is what I wouldn't have seen 25 years ago. And you know, I believe that we I don't know how many young black people want to get into radio. And I'm saying, aside from music, take music out. Music's a given. We all love music. You know, it's a given. I actually, when people say, oh, Trevor Nelson, I say, you know what? It's easy. You know, it's not easy to be up there, I have to say, and maintain, but it comes naturally to me. I find it easy. Reporting, doing news, you know, doing documentaries. A black guy wanting to do rock, you know, that's more difficult.
Yeah.
That they're where we have to, because we live as black people in this country are completely stereotypical. People always look at us as they put us in a box. They always have. They always have. Good at sport, good at music. That's us. But I'm impressed when people come and say, I do this, I do that, I do. And I think places like the BBC are a great place to explore. Commercial aren't under the same pressure as, say, a corporation like the BBC. That's why I'm impressed when I see commercial get involved a bit more like that, because I think it's a place where, you know, they do things a bit more that works for all. You know, if we get audience, we'll do it. You know, it's all about the bottom line, isn't it? It's about the number of listeners you have, whereas the Beeb can be more. We should be fair. We should have black people, minorities of all sorts. So I've seen it all. And I would say right now, it's a better world than it was before, Yvonne. It's still not quite good enough.
No.
But we need to also find out, do a lot of young black people want to do radio? I want to know how many young kids want to do radio. I want to know more about black kids who are trying and are good and can't get in. You have to be good, though. You have to be there on merit. And this tokenism thing don't ever feel you're less than anybody else. You're there on merit. And you have to hold your head up high and contribute, because I've always been that person. You know, when I walk in a building, I don't think, apart from the first day I was at Radio 1, I thought I was a fraud. But after that, no, you just do. You're not sure, are you? You just walk in and you go, I'm here, and you think, am I a fraud? I don't know. I put the needle on the record like this. My hand was shaking. I'm telling you, I had to do this. I had to stop. It's like I had Tourette's or something. I couldn't do it. But the moment I was comfortable, I felt empowered, you know, and I think that's what everybody should feel like. You're there on merit. And you know, the only way other black kids are going to get into this is to hear you, to see you, to know you're doing that job, you know, because I know there's a wave of kids that come through and go, oh man, I used to listen to you. And that's the reward for what I do. They come in and the first one they say is, man, you know, and it means so much to me, you know. So we just got to keep doing it and nurture people as they come in, because there are going to be bigots. There are going to be people, and you know they're there. But I believe every single person on this Zoom has a coping mechanism. Yeah. They don't just jump up and go, I'm angry, I'm going to knock you out. They deal with it in a different way, because that's kind of the stereotype they expect of us always. I'm going to knock you out, I'm angry. You know, now the whole world's talking about it and they're angry. So we've got backup. We don't have to lose it. Yeah. You know, we don't have to lose it. We just go, well, yeah, you're either a part of the problem or you're going to solve the problem. help solve the problem. So.
Well, that's amazing. We've we are just past our hour. So what I wanted to do, because again, I know that Aminata's definitely got to be going soon, but one of the things I wanted to do was just to kind of go round to each of you. I mean, we still have half an hour, but I want to do this whilst Aminata's still online, and just get one nugget, one thing that you feel that could be done, that is easily doable, that should be done, that could change this, do away with us having these types of discussion, make these types of discussions irrelevant, where we are part of the level and giving access and opportunity to a level playing field as far as the British radio industry is concerned. Is there one thing that you can tell me you think we could and should be doing?
I'd probably say for me, and maybe this is kind of on the back of what Trevor was saying, for me, radio is about having conversations. It's about having real, honest conversations. It's about giving a voice to people to hear those honest stories. It's about talking about stuff that will cultivate a conversation that will go on to something else. So for me, a way to move forward, and I'm very big on this, vulnerability, being really honest and open, talking about your own personal experiences or giving room for other people to do the same. And I think we're seeing a little bit of a transition. A lot of the young people around me, a lot of my peers are taking things into their own hands. They're starting podcasts, they're doing YouTubes. People are having some real honest conversations, and I can type in absolutely anything onto any podcast app, onto BBC Sounds, and there is someone having a conversation about it. And I think it's about having those honest conversations and expanding it, not just within your own social circles or your black friends. Have conversations with white people, talk to them, ask the conversations, but ensure it's within a safe space. So I'm not going to walk up to a random white person. I'm probably going to talk to a colleague. I'm probably going to have a conversation with a friend. If someone reaches out to me on social media, I'm probably going to say, well, let's talk about that. And I think that, to me, seems like one of the key, the lighting is going again. It's one of the
Keep waving.
It's the electricity. Yeah, I think that is probably one of the key ways of moving forward, and not being afraid to ask for opportunities. So I'm really blessed that my manager is so amazing. She's so supportive, and I will say, listen, I've got this idea. This is what I'm thinking. She'll be like, okay, leave it with me. I'm going to, take this higher. And she has, and opportunities have come that way. So don't be afraid to ask. And even that in itself is being vulnerable. Be vulnerable to ask for another opportunity. If you're good enough, absolutely, why not? And just to quickly probably go back to something you said slightly earlier about whether we think we've got here on our own merit or for other reasons. June Sarpong came and did a talk a few months back, in December actually, and someone asked the question, my work colleague Samaya, she asked the question and said, what if I'm only here, she's Asian, she was like, what if I'm only here because of my ethnicity, I'm here to tick a box? And June said, so what? She said, so if white people have been getting opportunities for the mere sake that they're white, or if you're not getting an opportunity because you're black, why not take up an opportunity for the fact that you are black, and if you need to figure it out on the job, absolutely do that, get the training, but don't feel like, oh, I'm only getting this because of my race. Even if you do, mate, make your mark.
Absolutely. Okay, can I go to Nels? Just to answer, to give me one thing that you think could help us to start this change, to start the process. Is Nels still?
Yeah, hi.
Yeah.
I'd say that my beliefs kind of line up with Aminata's really. I think it's time to talk. I think this industry has been very good at normalizing the conversation around mental health. So there's no reason they can't start normalizing the conversations about being a black voice in this industry. As Aminata said, I think is very important you have these black voices in your buildings, whether you hired them, whether they're, you know, they're freelancers, whether they're presenters, whatever. They know what it's like to be in that position. So why would you not have a conversation with them? That's what I think we should be doing. Alongside of that, I think there's more opportunities for black broadcasters, you know, pushing them outside their comfort zones, or not so much their comfort zones, but the comfort zones that society has set for them, you know, showing that they can be very, like, what's the word I'm looking for? I think it's versatility, showing versatility in what they can do and showing that they can do everything that their white or non-white counterparts can do, if not better.
Fantastic, fantastic. I'm going to move straight to Toni, because I want to try to get some, if our moderators can start preparing any questions that may, you can pass through to the chat box. We'll answer some questions from the audience. So Toni, can I ask you the same question? What's the one golden nugget or silver bullet or whatever the saying is that you can give us that can start to change this whole process, get the conversation going, move in the right direction?
Well, I'm afraid Mr. Nelson probably partly nicked what I was I was going to say earlier on, talking about
Trevor, not Mr. Trevor.
About seeing that we're here. I think it's visibility, so people know that there are black people in the industry, and maybe ask the questions, how do I do that then? How do I get into that? You know, I know black educators on media courses, and I don't know how many other black and minorities there are who actually want to be on the courses and actually make their way through that. And the people who come in on work experience on my place, there aren't that many, though one or two that have come through, they're now on, you know, local TV presenting the news. When I turn on the cinema, I think, that's fantastic. So, you know, if I won the lottery, it would be a marketing budget, you know, so we could get our faces out there. It's happened to me before. It's really weird seeing your own face on the side or back of a bus. I have to tell you that. But it shows people who you are, who's presenting the programme that you're listening to, and maybe prompting the conversation, oh, well, if they can do it, there is room for me to be there as well.
Okay, so we've just had a question in. Let's go to the questions. It's kind of what we're talking about now. Statistics speak for themselves. Radio has a race issue. Whilst I appreciate everyone's talking about their experience, it is what we need to do to change, and it cannot be our responsibility. It's quite interesting. The change has to come from the top of radios. So what do the panel think leadership should be doing, and where are the areas that need the most attention? And that's an anonymous question. Who wants to go?
That one on? I mean, I'll go. I'll start. Let's be honest. All media, not just radio. I know this is about radio, but we see it right across the media. You know what I've found, what I've noticed, and I've always kept a very, very keen eye on this: advertising. Okay, you look at advertising, you hear more black voices than you ever heard in your life. You now see more black people in adverts than you've ever seen in your life, which kind of says to me that slowly but surely they're thinking, well, we must be popular in some way, shape or form culturally. Hopefully that filters down into more TV presenters, more radio broadcasters, you know what I mean? Because everybody knows it's sexy to love a musician. You know, we live in a white country. Let's be fair. You know, we're going to be broadcasting, a lot of us are broadcasting mainly predominantly to white people. So we know, you know, it's not that cozy situation. Darren's on, you know, Aminata, you know, everyone's on a radio station where they're not talking to their own race most of the time. They're talking to the white race. So we know there is a selling going on here. We are selling something, you know what I mean? In a way, when we leak our culture to people, we're selling a part of our culture. Not everyone has the opportunity to sell their culture. I do through music. But if you're doing news, you're just doing news, aren't you? You're just you're not really selling your culture, but you are letting other people know that you are a black person who is doing a job that a white person normally would do. I think that's fair to say. So some of us do a job that could be done by a white person. Some of us do a job that rightly should be done, but, well, be careful when I say rightly, because no one's got a right. But Darren represents footballers, and there are lots of footballers who are black. There are lots of musicians who are black that I represent, in a sense. So in that, you know, I'm right in that way. But I notice that black, I don't see many Chinese people on television advertising the way they use black people. I don't hear many Chinese people of Chinese origin. They use black people more than any other race, it seems, outside of white people in this country. So therefore, I feel it should be reflected in radio and television a bit more. And I think there is a subtle shift happening. And it's not just because of George Floyd. I think it's been happening recently more and more and more. And I'm wondering if the powers that be will think, oh, black's sexy, black's good, we should have black radio. And also it's more visible radio than it used to be. It's far more visible. It used to be just a voice. People used to think I was a white guy who was cool. They thought, when they bumped into me, they used to go, oh, I thought you were a white guy who was kind of cool. You know that thing. And I used to be like, I didn't know whether it was an insult or a compliment, but I liked the fact that it made me anonymous, and I felt my colours certainly didn't hold me back. You know what I mean? Yeah. Now, everything, you know, if someone's on radio, you can just Google and see who's talking. Yeah. That didn't happen back in the day. It really didn't happen, which gave me a suit of armour, I think. Because when you're the only guy on the whole station, you know what I mean? You feel that you need a bit of protection, and that was my protection. So, I don't know, that's a weird theory, Yvonne. It's just something I've noticed a lot. It's our culture's leaking mainstream more and more, but it's being used more and more mainstream than ever before.
But are we getting the benefit?
No, that's not, it's never been that way though, is it? Our culture's always been sold and used for corporations. It always has been. So I wouldn't say we are necessarily, but it's given a lot of people a little opportunity, and it's subtly seeping into people's consciousness that we're part of everybody's life, a prominent part of your life. And so it should hopefully start seeping in. You know, if I'm running a commercial radio station, or, you know, even at the BBC, I'm not just going to protect the BBC, wherever. And I think, why can't that black woman do the breakfast show on the pop radio station? Why can't that black woman be my news editor? Or, you know, why not? If there are any things...
But who do you ask this question, Trevor? Who do you ask that question?
Who do I ask that question to? Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know. I've only been at the BBC. That's the only place I've been really for years. So I really don't know the landscape out there. But I just feel there's been something holding people back from giving opportunity to black people in the past. And I'd love to know what that little thing has been, because slowly it's opening, sometimes because of pressure.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of pressure going around. There are a lot of people around thinking, right, okay, they're giving black people jobs now. I think I'm going to apply because of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. And like June Sarpong said, I'm sure June meant it the best possible way. You are here because you're good, but don't feel guilty about being here. Mm-hmm. You know, as a feeling tokenistic, just take your opportunity, make it work for you. Because in the past, there's been a lot of jobs for the lads and jobs for the girls, you know, giving out.
All right, well, it's 1:45 and I'm very conscious that Aminata will have to leave. So Aminata, if you can just give us some parting words, and we'll thank you very much for taking the time. I know you've got to go off and do your thing. So just join us and give us the parting goodbye, and we'll let you go.
Thank you. Parting words, what can I say? I'm not too sure. Just, I guess, take advantage of as many opportunities as you can. Use the space that you have to elevate and uplift every other Black person, you know, who deserves to have that space. My show is dedicated to Black people and Black voices, and those are the only voices that I give a platform to, because on other shows, they're not necessarily going to get that. So, you know, use your platform, use the opportunities that you have, and have fun, enjoy it. You know, let's celebrate who we are. Yes, there's lots of challenging stuff going on. Sometimes it's hard being Black, but there's also so much more to celebrate and to talk about. So yeah, it's an amazing opportunity to be a part of. Connect with me on social media, and yeah, hopefully we'll catch up and be with you all soon.
Send those out. We'll send those
Awesome.
out.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you. You all take care.
Take care now.
You too. Have a good show.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got the questions coming thick and fast now. They know it. We're about to come off air, so everybody's deciding to ask their questions. So let's go to, I'm going to ask Darren this question. In what ways would you like to see allies support their co-workers and help new talent to come into the arts as a whole?
I think first and foremost is conversation. I think in any line of work, when you're trying to open new doors and new opportunities, you have to have an open dialogue. There's got to be communication there. And certainly, as I've said there, being at talkSPORT, I think the communication has been a lot better. It's been very, very good. And when I say that, I mean, I'm talking about some of the bosses at the very top who are prompting the conversations, which is, I think, good. I'm not having to go to them or other Black people who've come into talkSPORT to go to them and say, listen, this needs to happen, that needs to happen. They're pulling us aside and saying, well, listen, we understand that there's a diversity problem here. So we need to change it and we need you to help us. Do you know what I mean? We need to come to, we need you to help us. And I think having them type of conversations and that communication, I think is key, because then you're not guessing what people are thinking. You're not wondering, well, how am I going to get another opportunity? And I always felt for myself, especially in the position that I'm in at talkSPORT, having to work hard to get there, that I kind of got a responsibility for who's coming up behind me, like the people that who want opportunities from behind me. So I'm trying to open as many doors as long myself, a few of the other presenters, open as many doors as they can. So then there's not so much of a struggle there. It's kind of, the path is a lot easier. But as I said, because so many people at the company that I work at, talkSPORT, are open to change and are prepared to put the work in to make things happen and make the change, it has become slightly easier. Now, we know for a while, I've experienced it firsthand, not everybody is happy with change, especially at this network where the audiences, do you know what I mean? They're not happy with the new presenters that are on the TV show, on the radio station. They're not happy with it. That you say something and they're not happy with what you've got to say because they're so stuck in their ways. But that's not affected the boss, because I'm sure in other companies, and I've experienced it again, where they kind of lean towards what the fans want to hear or the listeners want to hear. So they'll be like, well, that's not really gone down too well, so we might move away from that. Whereas that talkSPORT, they said, well, we don't really care about what they really particularly want, because in time, things will change and will be better. Mm-hmm. So I just think you need to definitely have open communication and have conversations. Even if it's uncomfortable, these communications still need to happen.
So I think it sounds as though talkSPORT might have the answer to all of this problem.
No, but to be honest, problem.
It's a good way to start. It's a good way to start. I mean, it sounds to me like, I've forgotten his name, but your boss is forward thinking and open to listening and open to giving opportunities. So that is definitely a good way to start. And maybe, when I'm not trying to tie my colleagues into anything, but when we have the radio festival, maybe, I know we're going to have a diversity panel, so maybe we can ask your boss to come and share some of those thoughts with us. So thank you for that. We've got a couple more questions. We've got quite a few more questions. We've been asked about, it's a fascinating conversation so far. The Asian population of the UK is twice as large as the Black population, but Asian voices are even more rare on mainstream radio. What can Asian presenters learn from your experiences? We are considering doing, we have had a question like this earlier on, and we are considering looking at doing an Asian version of this very webinar. But just if you can give me any kind of, any thoughts really?
I agree. That's quite simply, I agree. Though we have Asian Network at the BBC, of course, if you take that away, it's not a huge amount. And I think that is, yeah, I mean, Black Lives Matter, of course, but the Asian population is twice the size of our of us in this country. So they're a massive part of this country, and a lot of it, I suppose, is cultural. You know, sometimes, you know, let's not beat around the bush. There are certain cultures that like to keep their culture intact, and sometimes don't integrate as easily with the mainstream, you know, when it comes to media. But I'm surprised there aren't more. I really am. I mean, there are in a lot of very strong Asian presence in the BBC, especially in news and areas like that. But I am surprised in media on the whole. I don't know about radio. You may know more, Yvonne. I don't know about radio across the country, but that surprised me. Can I pick up on one thing about what Nels said, which I agree, and this is a common theme that's running through. Everybody on this panel is like some sort of apostle. You're in a radio station, and it's important. I know we shouldn't have to go the extra mile, but it's important we do talk. And it is important we choose our small battles, because there are always going to be small battles. Not everything's going to be hunky-dory. But talking to people is the only way. For a lot of people that you talk to, they don't know any black people. They don't have black friends, you know? And this is it's a truth. It's true. They don't have black friends. They don't encounter black people outside of maybe you at work or somebody like that. And it's really important that you do get a chance to talk to these to people, that your work colleagues, and enlighten them a little bit. I'm not saying go, hey, massive political on them. I'm just saying enlighten them a little bit, because it empowers them and it makes them feel more comfortable. And eventually, it's part of the reason, you know, that the idea of more black people getting into radio and getting jobs and opportunities come about. And I found that I do a lot of talking to a lot of people who want to listen, you know, because you'd be surprised how much they want to listen to your story or what your thoughts are on this or that or the other, you know. And I think that's a common thread that I've got from this, that everybody's already talking about that. Oh yeah, I'm the only one here, but you know what, I talk and I'm not quiet, and that's really important.
But it also goes back to what Nels was saying earlier about sometimes you dilute yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and exactly how, and think more about how you conduct yourself in a conversation or a debate. You know, for me, if I'm really het up about something, it's okay, how angry do I get? Because I don't want them saying that perception of the angry black woman. No, I'm just passing an opinion and I'm fighting because I think this. And at some point, we may have to agree to disagree, but I'm standing firm in what I'm saying. But
it's just the way you do it that's important.
Yes,
it's the way you do it that's important. We've all done it. We all still do it all the time. Trust me, even I do it all the time. And even I know people above me do it. As long as you're in the minority, just pick your battles, or when you've got to make a point, you don't make it the way you'd make it with a friend. You know what I mean? Where you just tell the friend straight. Yeah. You have to almost massage.
Form your words carefully and think, okay, how am I going to put this across?
It's something that in all industries, people of colour have to do, not just radio, you know, to get on. It's sad, but we do.
So listen, we're at the top of the hour, and I know we can carry on having much more worthwhile conversation on this whole thing. But the last question that I want to ask in closing, we've all, and this, Trevor and Toni, it's really for you guys. And I think you might know what I'm going to ask. How do you feel about your colleague, Sideman, who was so devastated that he felt he had to resign from his job? Should there be such strong feelings about where you work, who you work with, what they are allowed to say on radio, that you feel you have no alternative but resign your job when there are so few of us there already?
Who do you want to start with?
Darren, do you have something to say about that?
I mean, listen, it's when I heard the news, it's difficult, but it's such a tough one, being that what you can and you can't say. Now, me, I'd never want to hear that. I don't like that word. I don't think it should be used so openly as it was in that situation. So when it came about, because I think I was working when someone told me what had gone on, and I couldn't quite believe it, that in some respects it was quite ignorant again, that people can so freely just use that word and think that would be okay. Now it would have been nice if more and more. I mean, the petition was massive. I can't remember the exact numbers of how many people signed this petition about they weren't happy about them using the word. But I just think for people and for a network like the BBC to allow someone to speak so freely and say that word and use it so openly, I just think, well, where have they got that kind of confidence from that they believe they can just go and do that?
Yeah.
Was that meant from my side? If I said something like that, I'd be out the door straight away.
Absolutely. It was Darren. It was BBC Bristol News, which is completely independent of where we do the music side, like One Extra or Radio 1 or any of the music. It's the news is completely independent of the BBC, especially local, as they have their own, they have their own meetings and make their own judgments. It was something that I agreed. I hate the word. I've never liked the word. I've played the word in music so much because of the ownership that the American artists have. It's a complex word for white people to truly understand how it's used so much in black culture, yet we hate when they use it. And it just, Sideman's resignation was dramatic to say the least. I wish he told us all. He didn't tell anyone, he just did it. And it brought the whole station into the picture when the whole station's got nothing to do with BBC News, Bristol. And that was a confusion. People are like, well, how would you let that go out on your station? It didn't go out on our station. It went out, it went out on BBC in general. So it was just, it was a lot of, it was like a lot of progress. And then, wow, my missus said, who's Sideman? While I'm on the phone talking about it, he's on the news. And I was like, oh my God, and it was, but if there's one thing that comes from it, it's a complication of the M word. It's how complicated that thing is. And we're talking about George Floyd, and we're talking about Black Lives Matter, and we're talking about Black Lives Matter. We don't say Black Lives Matter more than white people. We might as well wear a t-shirt saying our lives matter as well. That's the t-shirt we might as well wear. And if you wore that t-shirt, talkSPORT, everyone go, oh, I get that. Your lives matter as well. I see. But no, Black Lives Matter is a bit strong for us, Well, Sideman going and the use of that M word was the next thing on the agenda. It's like, how do you explain the M word to the average person at large? In America, they understand where to use it and when not to use it. In this country, because it's not a word that, it's not our word. No. Don't get me wrong. I don't want nothing to do with that word. Really, they don't understand how it's used in music, but yet, it's just horrible to hear it. The BBC, I'm going to put it out there, should have shut it down quicker, apologised quicker. Should have done way better and not let it get to that point. I don't think it's going to happen again, but I'm disappointed that we had to bump our car or crash our car to learn how to drive, and I say our because I work at the corporation, although I don't work in news. So it was a sad day. I'll be honest with you. It was a sad day. It's a sad day because there's a lot of good being done. And then all of a sudden the drama of that day, and it left a lot of DJs feeling a little bit like confused as to what they should do. And that was the problem with it. And I wish he'd at least spoken to the team. That's all I'm saying in that respect. I respect what he did. I respect his feeling. But the one thing we got to understand is we're all team players here. We're all on the same struggle. You know what I mean? And if you stand aside and you make your own decision like that, you're leaving a lot of your colleagues, they're at the mercy of social media, which I didn't agree with. As a senior broadcaster, I didn't agree with that at all. But I respect his view. Yeah,
it was a very brave thing to do, I thought. And I left me feeling, would I feel principled enough to do the same?
Yeah.
And I think, you're right, the BBC should have shut it down a lot quicker. It's the context they put it in as to why they did it. You can say, okay, you would want to illustrate the language used in the incident. But I think even if you still bleeped it out, I think there are many people who have imagination enough to understand what was said.
Absolutely.
So you didn't actually need to say it and verbalise it. People would get it and think, oh, okay. But I also have some confidence, that you hope it wouldn't happen again, but it actually happened twice in a week, didn't it? Because it went out in a history program before that, and there was some context around a warning about the language, but still, when you hear it, it's like a knife in your heart, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, 100% it is.
You know, I remember seeing a repeat of Dam Busters on Channel 5. I didn't know that Douglas Bader's dog had that name until I heard it and thought, seriously, and you put this out on a Sunday afternoon? I think they'll probably re-edit it now.
It's
but
almost as if we need black people
in
every department to remind people you can't do that. You know, it's like that.
Yeah, but you think by now people should know better, don't you?
Yeah, but
you think so.
But it's where we're at. It's where we're at. We always assume that, but you just listen. I live in London. You don't. But you live in the Midlands, right? Which is pretty much a very ethnic area. You know.
Yeah, I'm Brummie born and bred.
Not every part of it. But you know, it's so amazing that when London it's like a completely different country in this country sometimes, and those big city metropolises are. And then when you go out, because I've DJed and toured around so many times, your eyes open and you do realise that if there aren't people of colour in a village, a town, you know, and that people aren't exposed to that, like I've been called coloured, you know, you know, and it's seen as polite. Well, not me being called that term, but I've heard the term used even up to last year a few times by older people, and they say it as if they're being incredibly polite, and they're just not aware that it's fine to say the word black. You know, it's not a racist word. It's where you know, call me black. You know, I overheard someone saying it, and I wanted to interject in the conversation. It wasn't my conversation, and I just went, "Whoa, wow." We're still there, you know. It's just we still got a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do.
All right. Well, listen, you guys and girls, we're past 8 o'clock, and I know this conversation could go on a lot longer, but we do have to shut it down now. And I just want to thank you all so much for responding so quickly. So, you know, graciously to share your thoughts, your opinions, to support the conversation. We've actually had one question from somebody asking, well, what is the Radio Academy doing about diversity? We are doing our bit. This is, as I said before, this is the opening of the conversations. We expect that we will have more of these. And as long as we need to keep talking, we will keep talking. But my one thing is, you know, a lot of you talked about, you said we should be talking, we should talk, that's what we should do. But at what point does talk become the walk? At what point? We can't keep talking all the time, because either they're not listening or they're not understanding. So, you know, we have to think, what is the next move? What is next? We have to be strategic. We have to think for ourselves. We can't wait for people to give us power. We have to think of how, and I'm not saying we have to take power, but we need to command in some way, you know, the respect that is due. We've been doing this for far too long, and we need to think of ways in which we can work with our white counterparts to make the radio, the British radio arena, a much better place for us all. So with that, I'd really like to thank you all. But before you go, I just want to say thank you to the team that made this happen, which is the Radio Academy's DNI team subgroup, which is led by Aradhna, Tayal, John Dash, Anthony Gay, Naomi, the wonderful Naomi, who's been running around and contacting you all. And I'm sure I've missed somebody off there. Oh, it might be me. So Naomi's been fantastic. Thank you so much. We also want to make sure that those of you who are on air tune in to next week as well. We apologize for the technicalities that have not quite worked with us on Zoom. And I'm sure by next week we will have made sure that everything works the way it should. Last but not least, we want to make sure we say thank you so much to Radio Today, who has recorded or will be hosting both of the webinars on their website for us. We'll also be turning these into podcasts so people can listen on the move. So it's packed jam with lots of great information, lots of great experiences from you guys. And hopefully some of this information, tips and shared experiences will filter upwards to the ears of the influencers and the people in power. Next week, the wonderful Swazi from KISS will be chairing, so you won't be looking at me. We also have, as part of the team, Nicole Logan, the station manager from Transmission Roundhouse. We will have Bernard Achampong from Premier Radio, Lorna Clark, who you talked about, controller for pop music on BBC Two, and you might even remember this name, Trevor, Ivor Etienne, who was, of course, program controller at Choice FM.
Yeah.
So I'm going to close by saying my name is Yvonne Thompson. I'm chair of the Radio Academy, and thank you for joining the R.O.A.R webinar. We have to keep the R.O.A.R going. This webinar was brought to you by the Radio Academy, and I thank you all for joining us. So let's just go around and give our last goodbyes, and thank you again. So Darren, over to you.
So yeah, just say thanks for having me, and really enjoyed the chat. I think it was an important message that we put out there. But obviously my leaving part in kind of message is just the communication. Do you know what I mean? Just don't ever stop giving up. Do you know what I mean? If you don't get an opportunity, don't stop there, because that's not helping anyone. We've got to just keep going, keep fighting this battle, and hopefully eventually we can keep knocking down doors and knocking down walls. So yeah, thanks again for having me, and let's do it again.
Oh, he wants to do it again. Okay.
Yeah.
You're on. Thank you. Nels, over to you.
Just echoing what Darren's saying, you know, thank you for having me. If you want to connect with me on socials, my @ is @Nels Hylton. Yeah, I'd love to do something like this again, because I think the conversation is far from over, and to, you know, all my black broadcasters out there, the best is yet to come.
Okay, Darren, do you want to share your social media? Because everyone else seems to be.
Yes, my Twitter is @Darren Bent. So yeah, if you want to find me on Twitter, yes, @Darren Bent. Pretty simple.
Thank you so much. Toni, over to you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I was initially one of those people who was actually quite nervous about the conversation, but I thought it was important enough to push myself to take part, and I am very glad that I did, to be able to share experiences and hear other people's experiences and views as well. So thank you very much for that, and hopefully, yes, now we've talked the talk, we can start walking the walk and get more people in, because I want to see more people who look like me and, you know, other colleagues and people of colour, and get us into this industry. We need the fresh blood to keep it alive, you know. So thank you very much, and I'm @TonyEarlybird on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you.
Amazing. And yeah, what did I say? Bye, Trevor. No. Over to you.
It's been great talking with other broadcasters. By the way, you know, it's really enlightening. And I would say to anyone, if you get an opportunity, please take it. Please take it and be the best you can be, because for everyone who's on air, trust me, I think 3, 4, 5 people will want to do what you're doing because you're on air. So it's really important you do the best you can, be the best you can, and radio's a great media. It's fantastic. You know, I love doing it, and it's still my favourite by far. I love it more than telly or anything else. So yeah, fantastic.
Amazing. From the Radio Academy, thank you all very much for participating. Thank you also to the audience, the attendees, and thank you for those who were brave enough to post comments and questions. Thank you to the moderators, Hannah May and Sydney, for doing all the background work. Thank you all again. If I've missed anybody out, it's not intentional. We've had so much help from everybody. James Mobb, thank you very much for doing some of our social media design. It just goes on. Thank you so much.
It's dinner time!
Yeah, it sure is.
Man is hungry!
Okay. Bye for now.
Football's on! See you later, Darren.
Right. Take care.
Bye. Lovely to virtually meet you all.
See you guys. Brilliant. Really
Bye-bye.
brilliant.